go through again the 8 components of sheltered instruction. Read them with me. Building background, comprehensible input, strategies, interaction, practice and application, lesson delivery, review and assessment, and lesson prep. So say lesson prep with me.
Lesson prep.
And you want to think of 2 different types of objectives. Say content objective.
Content objectives.
And those content objectives come from your Common Core State Standards. Say Common Core State Standards.
Common Core State Standards.
They could also come from NextGen. Say NextGen.
NextGen.
Or they can be the New Mexico Social Studies Standards.
New Mexico Social Studies Standards.
So I have a picture here of Common Core State Standards to support that understanding. And you're also going to want to have language objectives. Say language objectives.
Language objectives.
And in New Mexico, we get these from WIDA. Say WIDA.
WIDA.
And you will learn a lot more about that later on in class. But they are ELD standards. ELD stands for
English language development.
English language development. So when we think of our standards, here we have an example of a content and a language objective. We want to make sure that they are meaningful. Say meaningful.
Meaningful.
Say meaningful.
Meaningful.
Show me meaningful.
Meaningful.
That they make sense. Accessible. Say accessible.
Accessible.
That they supplement what students are already learning. Say supplement.
Supplement.
And that they're collaborative. Say collaborative.
Collaborative.
So we'll add some CPR for this. Meaningful.
Meaningful.
Accessible.
Accessible.
What should we do for supplement? Supplement.
Supplement.
Collaborative.
Collaborative.
Okay. So after we come up with our language objectives, we look at our standards, we assess the language levels of our students, then we have to build background. Say, build background.
Build background.
Which we already participated in a building background activity, too, with the observation charts and the inquiry chart. So we want to make sure that we have linked content.
Linked content.
And concepts.
Concepts.
So show me linked content and concepts.
Linked content and concepts.
That we're teaching key vocabulary. Say key vocabulary.
Key vocabulary.
Maybe I'll draw. And that we're providing support with visuals. Say visuals.
Visuals.
You'll see me using a lot of what I call picture file cards. So authentic pictures. So everyone look at an authentic picture, make meaning. TPR, say TPR.
TPR.
Which stands for total. Do you guys know?
Total
Response, which you've already been practicing. And the use of realia. Say realia.
Realia.
So the actual things themselves. And I might even put technology on here as well. Say technology.
Technology.
G. All right. With an elbow partner, discuss how do you create content objectives or look at your content objectives, and how do you build background with your students?
Print them all out.
Oh, the NextGen or the for the science?
That's a very good comment. Would anyone like to share? How do you build background? What are some things you do to connect your students from standards to building background? I have good wait time. Did you have it?
Sometimes I do PowerPoints with images and stuff like that.
So using visuals.
Visuals, yeah.
I heard a good comment here about we're all part of the real world. Someone made a really excellent comment.
I said my students have been living in the physical world all their lives, and so if you're teaching physics, they have a lot to draw from.
Totally. And oftentimes we think of physics, oh, I can't do physics, that's way too abstract. But they've been living in the physical world, they bring with them this wealth of knowledge. So just connecting them to that will help them learn as they go deeper into the NextGen standards. Awesome. let's keep moving. So next we're going to talk about comprehensible input. Say comprehensible input.
Comprehensible input.
Say comprehensible.
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 So when we give students comprehensible input, meaning we want them to understand and have access to it, we need to make sure we're using appropriate speech. Say appropriate speech.
Appropriate speech.
Paying careful attention to our tone. Say tone.
Tone.
Speed.
Speed.
And articulation.
Articulation.
So that does not mean that we have to talk to our English language learners like this. But we do have to be mindful of our tone and our articulation. And also the words that we're using. So we need to give a clear explanation. Say clear explanation.
Clear explanation.
I always think of it as a foggy window. When you're driving or you're getting in your car in the morning, you can kind of see what's going on outside, but it's fogged up, there's ice. So what we're trying to do in sheltered instruction is remove that ice. So everyone get your ice scraper or your credit card that you use. And we're making it so that they can see clearly. And we do that through a variety of methods. Say variety of methods.
Variety of methods.
And through partner work or group work. Say partner work.
Partner work.
Group work.
Group work.
Writing.
Writing.
Reading.
Reading.
And here they'd be speaking to each other. Technology.
Technology.
Technology. Or and art. Art. Alright. So comprehensible input. And we do that through strategies. Say strategies.
Strategies.
And we want students to have opportunities to use the language. So we do that with processing time. Say processing time.
Processing time.
So we call them in GLAD, in Project GLAD, we call them 10-2s, that idea that you talk for about 10 minutes and then you pause and give students time to process for about 2. It looks different depending on the grades. Sometimes it's 30-15, some is in seconds. Sometimes it might be 5-1, depending on your grade level or where they need that pausing time. So I've already given you one pause. We're going to take another one in a minute. But if you just saw me standing up here the whole time, chances are you would stop paying attention. Our brains can only handle about 10 minutes before we have to process. We also use scaffolds. Say scaffolds.
Scaffolds.
So at CNM right now, that building that was right by our old classroom, that's going to be the new education building. And it's being held up with scaffolds. There's a little construction dude. So scaffolds are supports. Everyone say supports.
Supports.
Release.
Release.
We are not going to keep that scaffolding up there as the building keeps getting built. So scaffolds is the intentional support. Say intentional support.
Intentional support.
And release.
And release.
You have to release your scaffolds. So we do this with things like sentence frames. Say sentence frames.
Sentence frames.
Graphic organizers.
Graphic organizers.
Realia.
Realia.
Visuals.
Visuals.
And then asking higher order thinking questions.
Higher order thinking questions.
And we'll talk a little bit more about Bloom's taxonomy. Thumbs up if you're familiar with Bloom's taxonomy. What about depth of knowledge? Be okay.
Yeah.
So by intentionally asking these questions. Okay, with an elbow partner, what are some strategies you're already using to support comprehensible input? So here I have some picture file cards showing different strategies. It's going to be what this room looks like after. Here we have a very It looks almost crowded, but it's not because it's all purposeful. Wall of strategies, and then again supporting with realia or manipulatives are strategies. Who can share out what kind of things are you already doing in your classroom to support comprehensible input?
Are they great partner? I like to play the music from the time.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
I will play the music so maybe you get the idea of how depressing it was.
Okay. Yeah, connecting them to music,
Yeah.
which also connects into the multiple intelligences for those musical kids. Okay, one more. Yes.
In my primary special ed classroom, I use a lot of realia, concrete things. Like we did a unit on wants and needs.
Mm.
And so I gathered things that were wants and gathered things that were needs. And then they had to choose which they were going to buy, like lunch or a bag of chips, that kind of thing.
Awesome. Good connections. Thank you. So let's talk about interaction. Say interaction. And the key word for interaction is that it has to be purposeful. Say purposeful.
Purposeful.
And I'm not sure if I spelled purposeful right. I'll come back and check that later. So we want to provide frequent opportunities. Say frequent opportunities.
Frequent opportunities.
For students to practice their language.
For students to practice their language.
So I'm going to have T for teacher, S for student. So we want teacher to student interaction. So show me you interacting with the student. How would you interact with the student? We want student to student. Say student to student.
Student to student.
Student to community.
Student to community.
I'm going to add student to technology.
Student to
They
technology.
need to be able to learn how to interact with the technological world. And we need to give them that processing time. Say processing time. So have you heard of the we do? I do. You do. There we go. So that idea that we're having this experience as a whole group, you move the experience into small groups or teams where students can intentionally practice with their peers, that's student to student, and then finally, individual. So everyone say whole group, teams, individual. And this is often where I see a step being missed. So whole group will explain a math problem, okay, go do it by yourself. So we are neglecting to give students this time to work with each other in their groups and make meaning from each other. So here we have some students. Looks like they're working together on some sort of STEM project. And then we have some little girls interacting with interacting with the walls. So the idea that they're making meaning together. All right. So after we have interaction and we go whole, small, individual, now we can do practice and application. Say practice and application.
Practice and application.
And we want that to be in context. Say in context.
In context.
And real world.
Real world.
Making sure we're providing meaning to our students into what they're doing. You're connecting them back to your objectives so that they understand there's purpose behind what they're learning. So it's applicable to the language objectives and the content objectives. They know where they're going. And that you're supporting them in all domains. Say all domains.
All domains.
Which are reading, writing, speaking, and that's an ear, apparently, and listening. Oh boy. And again, we're connecting them through practice and application with whole group, small group, and then individual. Okay. With your elbow partner, what are some things about giving students the time to interact or practice that may be difficult in considering your English language learners? What difficulties have you may have run into with these sections? I'm going to move this forward just for the sake of time. What were some difficulties that came up in your conversations? I haven't heard from the middle or the floor.
We said if they were in a a group or in a small group, if somebody else doesn't speak the same language,
Okay,
it would be hard to group them
so teaching, you'd have to intentionally teach students how to communicate
with them.
with each other in different languages. Or if they don't speak that language, how do you guys help this kid make meaning of what you're learning? That's a good point, and that is difficult. Any other?
We said that
Situation.
ours can be easily distractible.
Yeah.
So it can be hard to keep them.
How do you
This
keep
is
them
what we're
engaged?
talking about.
Yeah, that whole engagement piece of how do we keep students
And even
engaged?
to add on to her, the opposite is also true where they don't talk at all. And then somebody will be like the mother or the, you know, I'm gonna just take care of you and do all the work for you and
Mhm.
the opportunity to speak is.
How do we get the student to student to be
Yeah, so
equitable
both
as
of
well
those.
and have students held accountable?
We talked,
Excellent.
I'm sorry. We talked about how a lot of these, particularly the little guys, they don't know how to get in a group and equitably discuss anything.
Yes.
You know, I don't know how many times I've seen, okay, now everybody discuss, and they'll just kind of sit there with wide eyes and they have no idea what they're supposed to do.
And those are things that we have to intentionally teach and provide structure for. So again, thinking of our inquiry chart, if their questions arise, think about them. You can always write them on Post-its and we can post them on that chart. It's a living document and we can get back to those questions and those big ideas throughout the class. All right, let's move forward to lesson delivery. Say lesson delivery.
Lesson delivery.
I've said these a lot. You'll notice they get repeated. Content and language objectives. Say content and language objectives. Everything comes back to this. Students know where they're going. Say students know where they're going.
Students know where they're going.
And they have access to the content objectives. The content objectives aren't watered down for them. They have equal access to all the standards. If we don't give them access or even make it visible for them, they're not going to know where they're going. So if you neglect to show them math standards in their grade level, they'll never have access to that content. They have to at least be able to see it and have access to it. And we do that through student engagement. Say student engagement.
Student engagement.
Which we talked about can be difficult. And appropriate level. Say appropriate level.
Appropriate level.
And again, I don't want this to be misinterpreted as lowering the level of standards for the students, but thinking about how you can provide scaffolds to help them get there. So let's think. And also that we are culturally sensitive. Say culturally sensitive.
Culturally sensitive.
I may have spelled that wrong. I will check that later. And last but not least, we'll talk about assessments. Say review and assessment.
Review and assessment.
So we want a comprehensive review. Say comprehensive review.
Comprehensive review.
Of key vocabulary and content. Say key vocabulary and
Key
content.
vocabulary and content.
Again, we're going back to the beginning, kind of. So, brain research shows that in order for you to acquire a new term in another language, you have to hear it 30 to 60 times in context for you to actually get it in your schema. So, that's why repetition is so important, and you're going to hear us repeat things over and over and over again. Or you'll want to repeat things with your students over and over and over again. So depending on the meaning they've already made with that term, if they have prior knowledge on it or not, it could be you explaining it to them or saying that term 60 times. But if you never provide them visuals, then they don't build that context. So it has to be in context. We need to think of our feedback being timely. Say timely.
Timely.
Regular.
Regular.
And relevant.
Relevant.
I think of video games. That's a video game console thing. I don't know. I don't play video games. But how many of our students play video games?
A lot.
And the cool thing about video games is that the feedback they're getting is regular, relevant, and timely. They mess up, they just keep going. And sometimes they keep going until 4 in the morning. Another example would be skateboarders. They're learning a trick, they fall down, they get up, learn from their mistake, do it again. Riding a bike. So thinking of yourself as a video game or a skateboarder, how can you make that feedback in the moment so that there's not that lapse time? Then the 3 types of assessments we'll talk about in class are diagnostics. Say diagnostic.
Diagnostic.
We already did 2 today with our observation charts. And our inquiry, formative and summative.
Summative.
In your own understanding, what's the difference between formative and summative? How about talk with each other really quick? So diagnostic is the that prior knowledge.
Okay.
What's your understanding of the difference between formative and summative?
Formative is for learning and summative is of learning.
So formative is for learning, and
So
this
that
is
we know where to
okay.
beef up.
I like that.
Summative is of
For learning.
I don't get it.
This is versus of learning. So in formative assessments, you're testing on or you're looking at what they're learning in the moment, so you can revise
It's like
your
throughout.
teaching throughout.
Your mom is
Summative is what happens at the end of something. However, you still can go from the summative back to the beginning.
I have a good visual for this.
Tell me.
If the cook is tasting the soup, that's formative, and when the guests are eating the soup, that's summative.
That's awesome. So if the cook is tasting the soup, that's formative. If the guests are eating it, that's summative. That's an excellent analogy. I like it. Thank you. All right. So last 10-2 we're going to do, and then I'll talk about delivery of this a little bit. Review with a partner, what are the 8 components of sheltered instruction?